everybody. Welcome back to the Milligenics podcast. As usual, you have your main host, Master Roshi, and your other main host, of course, just as
Sensei,
important.
baby.
Yes, Sensei in the house. And today we have a very interesting episode, I would want to say. We're covering a very intriguing topic, something that um, I don't think we put too much thought into. I think this is just something that we do on a regular basis, I should say, Sensei. And that is going to be covering the topic of reading facial expressions. So, we do this on a regular basis, whether we are consciously or subconsciously thinking about it, but it is quite an important aspect. Historically speaking, we've been doing this since ancient times. So we actually have, as a species, 10,000 expressions. And the way we're able to do that is through 43 muscles on our face. And I know we have masks on, so it's kind of difficult to kind of see some of those. I think that's actually an interesting point, Sensei, that, one of the things right now is that we can't really see facial expressions. So we're having to look at other sort of things, other aspects of how we're able to understand people, communicate with people. So I just thought that was actually an interesting point I didn't even think about. But I guess that leads me to the question that we can kind of get off, um, you know, get out of the way right now, which is, how are we able to, facial expressions are important. How are we able to be able to cope with the fact that we can't read facial expressions right now? I know the eyes are really important. So, Sensei, could you weigh in on that and,
Well,
tell us a little more?
like you said, there are 43 muscles, okay, and not all the muscles are behind this mask. Many of them are in the eye area.
Hmm.
So because of it, although we may not read the entirety of it, we can still read a lot of it.
Hmm.
You know, I read somewhere years ago, I can't really remember the reference point, but I remember, reading something about folks in Asia who wore the veils,
Hmm.
the women that wore the veils, and and they still do, uh, but back when it was heavily, influenced for women to do this. Now there's more modern women. Some wear it sometimes, some wear it, some do not wear it. Some wear it all the time, and some do not wear it at all. So
Hmm.
there's more flexibility now in that society. But back when, it was just the eyes exposed, everything covered. And one of the things that they noticed, because they were doing, this was in Time magazine that I remember, but it was like, Jesus, I think it was like in the 80s, man, that I read this. So I can't really remember all these things. And one of the things that they said is that, that over there, many of the women have these beautiful eyes.
Hmm.
There's this beautiful, beautiful eyes. And they said that part of it is through the evolution process.
Hmm.
um, the eyes became their main point of flirtations, of flirting. So without showing any other part of their body, they were able to influence the male species through their eyes, and they became their particular one of their particular strengths. So I think that right now we're gonna, perhaps if this continues, we're going to develop similar ways where we're going to be able to see a lot of the expressions through the eyes.
Hmm.
But that might take some time. So I think that, going back to your question, I think that because we have many other facts or factors that contribute to reading emotions, um, that we can still see whether somebody is happy,
Hmm.
sad, or surprised. Maybe I may not be able to see all the thousands of expressions, but I might be able to see the seven most common ones.
Right.
that can derive from those thousands of them, and with that I can have an educated guess of how people are feeling towards my conversations and towards my actions.
Yeah, and seven of those expressions are ones that we have come at one point into another in feeling, whether we know it or not. But just to kind of give you what the factual number is or what they are, the first one is anger, which I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with. Then you have fear, disgust, happiness, sadness, surprise, and contempt. And contempt is kind of an overlap with anger and distrust, I'm sorry, of other people. So those are the seven expressions. And um, there's been a lot of attention, Sensei, over the years with being able to understand all these expressions in so many different aspects in the community, from law enforcement to surveillance, with terrorism, as a specific example, security, even politicians, and even just doing business with other people. You get a lot of nonverbal cues just from interacting with people and trying to read those expressions. And I think that's why it's so vital and critical that we talk about this, because we don't want this to escape most people, given how important it is and how important there are businesses, there are professionals that spend a lot of time trying to figure what these are and how they can help, with different aspects of our lives, whether it's trying to make a sale, as a salesperson, trying to win like an election. Um, so we see this in a lot of different ways. So there's actually a system that tries to figure out what all these expressions are, and it's called FACS. And what that stands for is Factual Coding Action System. And basically, all that means is that every time you make an expression, just know that someone has actually put a number to that expression and try to figure out what that means. And let me give you a very interesting example, Sensei. So there was a study done, very simple study, and they wanted to see people that are blind, or do they have the same ability to give the facial expressions, even though they haven't learned them, right? Because they can't see as they're growing from babies to adulthood, they can't see what facial expressions are. Are they able to offer those same facial expressions? And yes, it was proven that they do have the ability to give those facial expressions. And that is, as you said, a result of our evolution from our ancestors. And, we've talked a good deal about this in the past, in terms of our ancestors, and where we have these people, cavemen, Neanderthals, whatever sort of name you want to give them. That's all they had to go by, right? They see someone that they're not familiar with. Is it a threat? Is it a friend? So you have to go through these facial expressions, and it still plays a role to this day in terms of how we interact with people. Um, so I want to ask you, Sensei, do you feel like you've incorporated some of these, and if so, how?
Well, first off, what do you mean? Like if I offer some of these?
No, just like how being aware that these
Oh,
things are, a an actual
I think,
important.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we're all aware of it.
Hmm.
And this is why I think it's important that, because we're all aware of it, that we have to be sensitive to it.
Mm.
When you mention about this blind person and the study, I would probably assume that blind person was the most genuine and honest about their emotions.
Mm. Good point. Yeah.
Because they don't know how to hide it.
Hmm.
Okay, we learn this. This is a learned behavior.
Hmm.
That we learn as babies. Okay, as babies, we realize when our parents were sad, were angry, okay, or happy, And based on that, we were able to manipulate them. Maybe not manipulate them. Let's go with influencing them. All right. And vice versa, us with our children too. Okay. We may have expressed some facial expressions that may not have had said what we felt, but we needed to send a particular message because words were not useful.
Mhm.
So by showing some facial expressions, it was another way for us to communicate with a child that doesn't speak yet, but is able to pick up those facial expressions because, like you said, this comes from the caveman days. Okay, these are thousands of years. It's embedded in our DNA now. All right, it's in our blood flow. Okay, that kind of behavior. So now, do we exercise it? Absolutely. We have to. Okay. I think that you need to know, as a married man, if you're discussing a topic and you obviously see that it's bothering your wife, and there's no point to that topic, you may want to flip the script and go in a different and pivoting and go in a different direction because what's the point of upsetting her?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to win something out of it? Are you going to make your point? What is the point? Or you know what? The point is not worth it. Let me just keep moving, pivot left, and change that emotion. And the same thing with your child. Okay, you're having a very bright young lady. I'm sure she's able to pick up things right away. Okay, and you need to be aware of what message you're sending, and you need to be aware of also the message that she's sending you, so that you can tailor the message, your conversation. Okay, so whether we like it or not, it rules our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It drives our behavior, and this is why we have emojis, right? Emoticons or whatever you may want to call it. All right, and you got the happy face and the sad face and the angry face and whatever other faces there are to sort of validate, okay, and even influencing you into feeling something similar.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as long as I think it's an amazing way of communicating. But I was thinking, but it's also it can work for us or it can work against us.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to go about it, I think, is to be fully aware and when to execute that power. I tell people all the time, life is a poker game. Life is poker. You can't go to life and fold your cards and say, here, this is how I am and this is how I feel. No, you hold on to your cards, and then based on the hand, you drop one and you take one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's what life is. I feel it's almost one big poker game. All right. And the moment you allow your true emotions to show at the wrong time, okay, it can hurt your career, it can hurt your marriage, it can hurt your relationship with your child, it can hurt your friendships, it can hurt so many different things. It can hurt a sale.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you need to know how to influence the sale or the purchase. You can influence the purchase. All right, because if you show the wrong emotion at the time of a purchase, the salesman might pick that up and say, you know what, this person is desperate. Let me drive the price a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
But because we know this, we try to show a little bit of disinterest when we're buying a high priced item, because if we show too much interest, the salesman picks up on that emotion and it's going to drive the price up. So I think that it's a very important factor of our humanity. And like I've mentioned in the past, we need to know how to manage it. Just like
Mm-hmm.
all the other things in our lives, we need to know how to manage our emotions, and we definitely need to know how to read them.
Yeah.
But don't assume that the first sign is the right sign. let's say I'm having a conversation with you and you're yawning. Um, it might mean that you're disinterested in the conversation, or you know what? It might mean that you had a 15-hour day and you're pretty exhausted. Uh, so which one is it? Maybe by probing a little bit through a little bit of conversation, I'll be able to know. But nevertheless, the message was sent, whether you're disinterested or not, or whether you're tired or not. The message is not getting across. It's time to end it, and we can perhaps finish that message the next day.
Right. And so based on what you're saying, it sounds like that there's definitely a discipline that you have to have in terms of being able to, with yourself, in terms of how to react to the, expressions that you're seeing from people, and not just quickly just giving them, what you're feeling, because you got to be a little bit guarded about that. You don't want to just expose yourself all the time.
Yeah, imagine if I would have met, like the first time the first time I met my wife, right? I thought she was I was like, oh my, I was dumbstruck by her beauty. All right. And I was like, oh my God, right? Imagine how it would have been if I would have displayed my true emotions. She would have been like, this guy is creepy. I am staying away from him. All right. So what did I have to do? I had to play it cool. Like, hey, hey, what's up? How you doing? And not display the emotions that I was actually feeling. So if I would have displayed my true emotions at that moment, maybe I would have never been able to get married.
Right. Because you were showing too much desperation.
Because maybe I would have scared her away. So, you have to be able to hold back at times in order to influence folks the right way.
No,
we're just that one big basket case of emotions, Master Roshi. You, me, your wife, your child, my daughter, my friends, we're all one big basket case, and we all think that our emotions matter more than the others. And what we need to take into consideration is just like, other people's emotions just as much as our own.
Right. And I think that's called it's called emotionally, what's the word here, Sensei? It's
empathetic.
Empathetic. Exactly. So I think that's a big part of it. It's not just being able to read the expressions, but being able to know what to do with those expressions, I think is really vital and key.
But let me say something before we go into our next topic, right? Because I was having this conversation. It just so happens that I was having a similar conversation with my brother-in-law yesterday, right? And and being empathetic, I think it's fantastic. But then there are people who are too empathetic, and they immediately jump to conclusions over something that you may have expressed with your eyes or whatever, right? So society, I think, now is becoming a little bit too empathetic, okay, too emotionally sensitive. And because we're becoming too emotionally sensitive, we're becoming emotionally insensitive. And the reason why I say that, because everybody is so emotionally aware now. It's almost like, you don't want to say the wrong thing because you might offend a certain group. Everything is taken offensively. Okay. It's like everybody's just walking out with antennas, okay, of how anything or everything can be conceived as offensive, even though it was never meant to be. All right. And what might be offensive to you may not be offensive to somebody else. All right. And vice versa. So that if I'm in a room of 100 people, I might offend one or two. So the fact that we're becoming emotionally aware like this, it's almost like backfiring, because now if I express my emotions, I might lose my job. So a facial expression that I did, through an eyebrow that I raised, I may not lose it that day, but maybe that can be taken offensively to somebody else, and then it can work against me. So it's weird how one good thing can have also a negative impact. So empathetic, I love, I think I'm empathetic, but I've come across people who are like 3 times more sensitive than I am. And I have to walk on eggshells to say a word or two, because if I crack an eggshell, it's not a discussion, it's death and destruction by fire squad. It's like
or a hailstorm.
So I find that quite interesting of where we are going, and how our emotions are driving us as we move forward into this into our lives, and the new generation too, because as the generation is getting younger, they're dealing with less people.
Mm-hmm.
And what does this generation do? They entertain themselves. All right, and there's nothing wrong with entertainment. By watching TV, you watch TV, you watch this, but you're not learning from other human beings your age or older or younger. All right, you're spending a lot of time. So now, everything that let's say you have to address a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having a life experience, you have an entertainment experience that you subconsciously tap into to address that problem.
That's not real.
It's not real.
Mm-hmm.
So you might unwillingly and unknowingly follow the principles of a romantic comedy, when in reality, life is not a romantic comedy.
Mm-hmm.
It's freaking drama.
Right.
So I find it fascinating too how all of these things, are playing out little by little. But I'm really concerned about our young folks who are growing up with this. Okay, and when you have just 1 or 2 points of reference in your life, and when you go out there and deal with the multitude of points of references, you might get lost and overwhelmed.
Well, I want to add another layer of dimension to this, which I think is adding to the problem, and you can agree or disagree with me, Sensei, on this, but I think a lot of it has to do with technology. And what I mean specifically is a lot of the CGI that we've come to experience over the years, as it's getting better and better, I think that they are slowly deciphering all of these, facial expressions that we're seeing on the screen, right? And the best one I could give you is and I've used this in our episode before, has been Thanos from, the MCU, right? The Marvel Cinematic Universe. And to see a character like that's not real, but they're putting, these sort of nodes and things on his face, it makes him come to life. And so now you are looking at this character, which again is not real, and there's other aspects of this too, but you're, like you said, you're growing up in this world now, Generation Z or others, and you come to think that, this is how a person like this would behave in a situation like this. And it's not real, right? Mm-hmm. So we can't, in a certain respect, sometimes differentiate between what is real and what is not, because the technology is really blurring that line more and more. Another great example, we brought this up before too, has been where there is technology now that me or you can use, and basically we can pretend to have for example, like President Obama, right? We can have him say things or do things that he's never said before. And now all that stuff is proliferating through social media, and people are believing that this person is actually saying these things when he's never said these things. Mm-hmm. So yes, we are going by, I think, sort of a dark road, so to speak, where our youth is looking at things and it's harder for them to differentiate between reality and fantasy. So mm-hmm. I think that there's definitely an issue there. But I want to move on a little bit, because I think the next thing that I think we need to cover is something that has been, I feel like, a pretty popular topic, especially in the last couple of years, that has come up, and that's micro expressions. So just to give you a definition of what this is, so they are extremely quick, fleeting expressions when you're trying to control your expression. And it just happens to leak out. And an example of that could be like your boss is telling you something, and all of a sudden the snarl kind of comes out. And if you're not paying attention, you kind of miss it. So it's like this neural tug of war when you're trying to hide how you really feel, but you can't because it comes out and it comes out very quick. So, in your experience, Sensei, have you come across that? And if so, like in what ways?
Oh man, I think there's too many ways for me to even, to even think of it. But as a minority, I got in that a lot.
Mm.
Um, you know, going to, when I was younger. Now things have gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You can still see it from time to time, though, depending on what part of town you might end up going.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I remember being young, and you can sense that the waiter does not want to wait on me.
Mm.
And although at the time I was not trained in micro aggressions, I guess is one of the way. I think it's another term too, but or
Yes.
micro emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to sense it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so absolutely, I think that has happened. Um, I'm still aware of it now, and it still happens to me. But I'm able to, now that I'm trained on it, because I've watched videos and taken classes and all that stuff. Uh, I'm trained on it. I'm able to pick it up a little bit more. But now it's no longer an emotional, I guess, absorption of that micro emotion is more
Mm-hmm.
logical. All
Mm.
right. So before, and this is what comes sometimes, Master Roshi, you might meet somebody and you might say, I don't know why, but I like that person. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. It's in the last, I just met him like 3 minutes. I don't know why. I really like that person because perhaps the micro emotions, the micro expressions, okay, that they displayed during that 2 3 minute meeting may have been according to what the words were saying. So everything was in harmony. Or you might come across somebody that you might say, I don't know why. I don't know this person, but I don't like this person. I don't know why. I never dealt with this person, but I don't know, but I just can't. Eh.
Pinpoint.
Again, because without you knowing, you picked up a micro emotion, a micro expression, a microaggression. All right. But without you knowing, now you absorb this feeling about that other individual. So actually the training what has helped me was become less emotional as opposed to like just go with that. Oh man, I don't know why. To know exactly why and to try to now pivot my behavior so that I can have a better outcome.
Mm.
Okay. So yeah, I noticed sometimes I've done, as I mentioned to you, I was in the dance world before, and I remember one time I was doing a show, and my partner was a very fast dancer.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like like the moment she heard the music, it was like a bell, and she would just take off, and it's like, you know. So I remember telling her, why don't you slow down a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we'll pick up. Let me lead you, and you can tell the micro expression. She even started. See, even her eyes started twitching at one point.
That
But
says
I
it all.
respected that
Mm-hmm.
because she was able to control her emotions, even though she displayed it unwillingly and unknowingly. She was able to take the constructive criticism, okay, and apply it, and then we had a wonderful dancing experience.
Mm.
Um, so I think that has helped me realize who are the ones that perhaps are able to take some, I guess, some pushback,
Mm-hmm.
and some that do not. And then if you are the type that do not, then I don't really want to associate myself with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm gonna say things that are gonna be perhaps not as good, and you should be able to speak your mind without you being offended by it, and I should be able to do vice versa, so that we can have a harmonious relationship and friendship. But if I see that it's just a one-way street, I'd rather not be your friend because I'm not gonna walk on eggshells to make you happy.
Mm.
The answer is absolutely I have, and I have to and I had to pivot my behavior according. The same thing with my even with my own child. She's a 26-year-old beautiful young lady, and she has her her principles and her values that she lives by, and sometimes during our conversations I feel like I may violate some of those principles and values at times, and to avoid a conflict, because I don't really see her all the time. The last thing I want to do is that every time I see her, we're having a conflict, because then she's going to connect visit from that conflict. You know what? No visit from that then.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Avoid
want to I
conflict.
don't want to deal with this conflict. But because I'm able to see that right away, you know what? This is not a topic that we need to continue. It doesn't matter to me. Why do I have to win every argument or every discussion? No. Let me pivot left, because what's more important is the time that I'm actually spending with her, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the point that I'm trying to make.
Right.
Um, so it's helpful in many ways. Just it depends on how you want to use that superpower.
So I guess the lesson learned here, and I think what we're trying to be able to express, no pun intended, is that you want people to have some self-control over the expressions that they are delivering to people, because if you don't, then obviously the consequences of that is that you just may not have certain people around you, and that may not be necessarily what you want. I think that I think it's an interesting sort of tug of war here, because I feel like there's always this group of people that are like, oh, I should be able to say and express myself in any way that I want. And then on this other corner, we have this group where we're like, well, you got to be a little bit more cautious, about everything that you say, because it can hurt people. So I think you got to sort of be in the middle there. I don't think you can be at both extremes. Sometimes you don't want to be the person that just always hides your expressions or your micro expressions, because then people don't know how you actually feel. So I think that's a very important distinction that I think, if you agree with me, Sensei, that is the takeaway from all this, right? You don't want to be on the very extremes of the two. You want to kind of be in the middle. And I think that's what we're trying to help people understand through this podcast, is to have some self-control, because at the end of it, then everybody wins in a way. I mean, you're not always, you know, and it's not always about you winning. Sometimes you will lose, and that's okay, but you don't always have to make it about yourself and winning and getting your feelings across to people, no matter what. So I
No,
think
I
that's.
agree with you. I have lost many battles so I can win,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes losing is winning,
Mm-hmm.
and many times winning is losing. All right, so you won the argument, but you lost your wife. Like,
Right.
what's the, you know,
What's the point of that?
or you lost your job.
Mm-hmm.
You won the argument, you made your point, but you lost your job. So I'd rather lose the argument and keep my job. You know, it depends on if you love the job, of course. Uh, but yeah, no, absolutely. You have to be aware of these things, and you have to be aware of the consequences. And I get it that we live in a society of free speech, and everybody thinks, free speech, no, yeah, free speech. I can say whatever I want, and no, well, you can't say whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not fair. Okay, you should be able to say what you want, yes, but taking in consideration how you're going to how are you going to, you know, how it's going to affect the population that you're surrounding yourself with,
Mm-hmm.
you know, which is society. So it's a yes and no, absolutely. Life is, you know, there are some things about life that is very black and white,
Mm-hmm.
like you know, not killing people. You know, that's very black and white. You shouldn't kill people. Um, but life is mostly grays. There's a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of gray in between. And even killing people, you know, if someone's out to kill me, I might have to kill that person because incapacitating them may not be enough because the moment they get up, they're back to getting you again. So the only thing I might have to do is just completely, you know, remove the threat. But yeah, I think that life is a whole lot of different shades of gray, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we need to be somewhere in that paradigm because if you want in one of those two extremes, you can have a pretty difficult life, and life is short. You shouldn't, you know, you shouldn't be trying to win every argument in life or anything like that. You know, you should be able to win and lose and go about your business and be empathetic, absolutely, but don't be overly sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, be logical, absolutely, but take into consideration how others may feel about you. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, don't just make a decision because it's a logical decision. Yeah, um, you might want to do that, but how is that decision affecting the people around you,
Mm-hmm.
especially the loved ones? So I think you know, I think we need to just, like you said, okay, we need to be somewhere in that middle to make it a better life.
Yeah, and I'll make a last example here before we end the podcast, and just to give people a great example of what that all means. So, when I left the company that we worked with, I was there for about a year plus or so, and it just seemed like I just kept getting extended and extended from an intern, and I wasn't getting an opportunity to become a full-time employee. So I think that I was getting a bit of resentment, and that came out uh, not as a micro expression, but a full expression, and that resulted in a situation where I was just being sarcastic, and I know a lot of us are sarcastic, but I think I'm probably more so than most people, and unfortunately, that just was very blatant in the way that it came out. And basically, what happened was there was, and I think I've mentioned this example before. I was in a cubicle with my other coworkers, and on the other side of the wall was the chief technology officer, and there was this lady complaining about her computer, and she just had it, and I had it, right? Because I was already tired. I didn't want to help people anymore. I was kind of done, Sensei, and she was just like calling for help, and I just ignored her and pretended like nothing happened. And he came out, and I said, "Oh, such and such person, the CTO coming to the rescue." And that was bad. That was one of those terrible things I could say, but it helped me in a way. Luckily, they I don't think I think they wanted to let me go, but I don't remember. It's been so long. I was on my way out anyway, so it just kind of worked out in my favor.
Mhm.
But I just think that that was not the right approach. I regret that. If I could have went back in time, I would have changed it. And that's what I'm trying to relate is that you don't have to be that person, no matter how terrible um, your situation was. And it really wasn't that bad. I just made it seem like it was a lot worse. And I think that's just something psychologically that we do. We sometimes think that our situations are far worse than we think we realize they are. Because I still had a job, but the way that I expressed myself, and it was obvious that I was being sarcastic. There was no hiding it. My verbal cues, everything just kind of admitted that. But that's the extreme example that I want to tell
Mhm.
people, and I didn't approach that the right way. And I learned from it. And that's the most valuable thing, is that as a result of that situation, I was able to step back and realize that I needed to reel myself and have some more self-control about what I say. Because like you mentioned, Sensei, it's not just about you. I had a family at the time. So what I said and what I did has an impact far larger than my small circle, right? My small radius. It's a whole circumference, you know.
Mhm.
So that's what I'll say to kind of end the podcast today.
You know,
Any other
and
thoughts?
before, yeah, and you know, before you end it, I think that's a key component that we need to really keep in consideration. You know, because many of us have a lot more important things that are emotions going on in our lives. You know, so having a display of emotions can be costly.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really be careful of when to display those emotions. You know, you learned your lesson. You know, you were a
Mm-hmm.
young man, you learned your lesson, and now moving forward, okay, you try to keep that lesson at bay so that you won't do it again. But I think you made a very key point, because sometimes we get overwhelmed by the emotions and we think it's just all about us, and not realize that we got to pay rent, and we have to feed a little human being that is solely depending on us. And all that lifestyle can go away in the blink of an eye, because I decided to display the right emotion at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know.
And you know, technology is everywhere, so be very careful. Everything you say, everything that you do, whether you think you're being recorded, you probably are.
Mm.
So just watch out.
Yep.
Um, but that's all I have to add to today's podcast. Anything else, Sensei?
No, I'm good. I had a really good time talking about this topic. I thought it was fantastic. Um, and I enjoy sharing my own personal experiences of how it has impacted me and how it's going to continue to impact us in the future.
Absolutely. And with that said, I want to thank everybody for listening. Sensei, what should everybody do?
Uh, well, everyone, you know, manage your emotions. All right. With that, I will leave you. Uh, press the like button. All
Exactly.
right. We need your support if you like our podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good. Take care, everybody. Watch your
Take care,
emotions.
all.